the Subaru STI RA. When you see the carbon fiber, the spoiler, and of course the price tag, people are gonna go off the deep end hating on this thing, bringing up all the stereotypes, all of that. I'm not even gonna touch on it. I'm gonna take the high road and cover the pros, the cons, and of course,
I got some dip in my lip, and I see this Mitsubishi you got here. What the hell kind of shit is that? My granddaddy didn't fight Filipinas to have you filming this stuff. You need a real truck, real car, American.
I got my fidget spinner, I got my vape. I'm about to take that girl out on a Tinder date. Then I show her card tricks at my place. And I got 2 hoverboards we can race. Inhale, exhale, spin. Inhale, exhale, spin. Blow up, cool smoke, ring. I just learned this trick. Can't have no girlfriend. Too many options. Too good at vaping. Too busy fidget spinning.
oh boy, now you know how serious the STI RA is. How serious? Well, it's a limited edition. There's a numbered plate in the center console, which a lot of cars seem to be doing. Now, what's so special about it? Well, this is kind of a limited edition to commemorate a Nürburgring record run that they did in an STI body that they claim is a production car, and really in reality it's a straight up race car with a sequential gearbox, a race engine, a roll cage, you know, slick tires, everything that an STI is not. But this is kind of saying, look what we did, we put on some cool parts. The front end, it has a splitter for downforce. The rear has a dry carbon wing that is adjustable 2 ways, one for less downforce and one for more. How much, you ask? Beats me. You have a carbon fiber roof that looks great, it looks well produced, and it's supposed to increase the entire structural rigidity of the car. Other than that, there's just little things here and there that make it stand out, like the wheels, the BBS forged wheels, and the new wider tires, and these new monoblock brake calipers, which we'll talk about in the shop. It just looks, more racy, and it still doesn't look totally over the top either. Now, you certainly know all about the STI already. This has been out forever, so we're gonna stop talking about the exterior. The interior space, well, much like the WRX I just did a video on, and you can check that out, so much of this is the same. The things that are different, you have this ultra luxe suede, or whatever they call the steering wheel. It feels like Alcantara. The center console area, you have a lit up STI logo, you have your sport knob and your center differential control, and of course your RA badge on the center console. Other than that, really, this looks like every other STI and WRX of this generation. The upper gauge pod is a digital screen, which gives you a whole bunch of information, like your boost, your G-force, all of that fun stuff, which you pretty much are never going to pay attention to. And your center gauge cluster is the traditional old school analog gauges, left and right, and you have a digital display in the middle, which kind of basically only shows you like fuel economy, trip, and what drive mode you're in, sport, sharp, or intelligent. So it's just a pretty back to basics interior, and Subaru has kept this around, which seems like forever now. Now, the other thing about the interior space, and Todd brought this up because he's a huge Subaru guy, he said, if this is supposed to be the track STI, if it really is, and it's not just marketing, wouldn't you have a lot of the fluff deleted out of here? Like the infotainment, get rid of that. Get rid of some of the materials in the center armrest area, the seat heaters. And I kind of get what he's saying. But at the same time, conversely, there's pretty much nothing in this Subaru to begin with. You don't have lane departure, you don't have radar cruise control, you don't have all the eyesight module. So it's pretty stripped down, but you feel like they could go to another level to save even more cost on this. The big thing is, like, these Recaro seats. They're great. Alcantara center inserts, leather bolsters on the side, they'll hold up well, but they don't feel super supportive, supposedly, for a track car. It's basically the same thing that you can option out on a WRX. And they just feel kind of nerfed compared to like the Type R seats and the Focus RS seats. So that's something to note if you're kind of looking at this car. Really, there's not much else to say about the interior space. It's what we've been seeing for years. In fact, you wouldn't even know this is an RA unless you looked out the rear view mirror or saw the little plaque down here. That's about it. Everything that's bad and good about the other cars is here. The armrest still is just kind of crappy. The door pockets feel like it's been melted down plastic in a landfill. I mean, the chintziness is here, but also the great things are here, like the simplicity of use. It's not burdened by all the tech and tons of screens, and it's still just simple and easy on the eyes. The best part, visibility. Visibility and comfort. You can literally get in here and you really don't even have to look at your mirrors. You can see around you like cars that are 20 years old. And I think that's why so many people still love these things. Now, before I head into the shop, I think this has to be said. The interior and exterior of the STI RA has really grown on me, and I didn't think it would. I think partly it's the paint color matched with the carbon fiber accents that are functional. You know, this is not just some decal, it's not some fake carbon fiber wing. All this stuff kind of works together. This is not some ultra refined looking interior and exterior space. It's not like a BMW 3 Series or, you know, an Audi. And you know, the good thing is not every car has to be that. And that's one of the best parts about the Subarus in general, is they're not trying to fool you. What you see is what you get here, and I think that's my point. Let's head into the shop and talk to Turbowski about the mechanical aspects of the STI RA. What do we got under here, Scott?
Bunch of all-wheel drive stuff. Bunch of parts from the FRS, it looks like.
Or you could argue that the FRS has parts from this.
Oh, yeah.
This was before
Or
that.
the Legacy.
Yeah.
Or the Outback.
This has been around since 1952, and a lot of what you're used to on the STI is all here. Now, they have made some changes. You have 6 piston brakes in the front, monoblock calipers front and rear. You have 2 piston in the rear. You have an aluminum lower control arm with pillow ball mounts in the rear section of the lower control arms. You have inverted Bilstein struts in the front, which means the bump stops are built into the strut body themselves. The damping rates have changed. The spring rates have changed. There's a little bit of difference in rigidity here because you've gone to 35 series tires, forged BBS wheels. And you know, when you get into this compared to the regular STI, the first thing you're going to notice is the steering has a lot more heft, a lot more directness, and a lot more weight. And it's not something you typically notice you notice it on the street, but when I first got on the track, I mean, it was really noticeable. You know, when you start to hook and get some traction and it starts to break traction in the front, you literally feel something. The wheel fights back at you, which it doesn't happen on most. It should. And that's one of the best parts about this car. There is a very mechanical, old school feel to it in steering, clutch, and transmission. They're very kind of heavy.
Yeah, I agree on the transmission for sure.
Yeah. Scott, 4-wheel drive system, all-wheel drive here.
It's pretty tough.
That is. It's very tough when you compare it to the competition. And that's where this stands out and has always stood out. Nobody has done it like this. And a lot of it has to do with the cost of doing what they're doing here. You have a center differential. You have a true 4-wheel drive system. Your front differential has a helical style LSD. Your rear has a torsion limited slip. And now the center differential is electronically controlled completely. It used to be a split mechanical and electronically controlled. Now it's all electronic. And you can control the center differential from the interior. It allows you to do that. And that is why you're paying a lot of money for the STI compared to the TypeR. And this is the biggest thing. Why are you paying $50,000 for this? Well, in large part, it's the special edition. It
has cherry blossom accents.
Yes, you're paying for the cherry blossom accents, the carbon fibery, and some of the other tweaks. Is it worth it? I don't know. That's up to you. But why you're paying for more with the STI in general is this system. And it definitely is better than the Focus RS, which is just a glorified on-demand all-wheel drive setup that you'd find in a Ford Escape or any one of these cute utes. The only thing that's kind of close to this is the Golf R, which uses a Haldex style system which, you know, is really good, but is not as dynamic as this in pretty much all conditions. All right, we made it to the back, Scott, and we pretty much talked about everything other than this thing looks like a straight up, somebody regurgitated mud and dirt, surface rust all over it. Somebody mudding in this thing?
Rear ends are usually pretty muddy.
You have a double wishbone suspension in the back with a premium exhaust system here that adds about 2 horsepower. There are not many changes. Again, you have the Bilstein rear dampers, and you do have a change in one of the lateral links. They do use a pillow ball mount style bushing, which I can't seem to find. It all looks like rubber bushings to me. But anyway, there's really not much different back here than a typical STI. So with that said, Scott, do you have any final thoughts about this?
It looks pretty much like a Tribeca back here. I think the reason they probably don't go too crazy on the exhaust because they know every motherfucker is going to take it off and put a cockeyed fucking muffler on the back.
Yeah, single outlet exhaust with a 15-inch tip. Scott, under the hood, what EJ series motor is this?
Some fucking 4-cylinder piece of shit.
Todd. Scott was terminated. He didn't take this serious, and I said right at the start of this, there wasn't going to be any jokes, no stereotypes. We were going to go above that. So here we are.
Yeah, the Subaru community did not like what he was saying, and they sent me here.
Okay.
So.
We're dealing with an EJ motor. Which EJ motor?
This is the EJ25.
EJ
just
25.
like all of them.
And does that mean it's 25 years old?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's one of the biggest complaints about this car, namely the RA, is why has Subaru stuck with the same thing when all its competitors, like the Focus RS is a 350 horsepower, 350 pound of torque car, the new Civic TypeR motor, why is this still in the past?
Because they don't want to spend money on performance vehicles. That's all I can see. I mean, they're CVTs. They got CVTs now. They're spending money on that. What else are they spending money on? I'm not sure.
SUVs. Pretty much.
Oh yeah, the big thing.
Yeah.
The thing.
And that's really, you want a straight answer is why? That's the truth. Because, most manufacturers will invest up to $50 to $60 million on engine development for an economy platform. So coming up with some high performance engine for a car that nobody buys, if you look at the sales numbers on the WRX, the STI, and the BRZ, it's laughable. It's pretty much less than 5% of their sales. And any good business case would say don't do it. So they've reused what they've had in their some barn somewhere, They have made some changes. So let's talk about that. You have sodium-filled exhaust valves, which other companies use. It's for heat dissipation. You have an exclusive and new ECU and ECU tuning for this car. You have a revised intake. You have a new exhaust, and all of that adds up to 5 horsepower. Yeah, 5.
5. Thanks.
Yeah, and then that's why people are this is old news. But, I'm not going to totally bag on it because there's some huge pros to this engine, this car specifically, and I'm going to talk about it in the driving segment. You have anything else to say, Todd?
Yeah. I was driving my 2002 WRX, and it feels exactly the same. Exactly the same. So, if you like older Subarus, you might like this. I don't know about the $50,000 price, but it's just like any other Subaru you've ever driven, WRX.
Welcome to driving the STI RA. Now, we've been joking around a lot, and in terms of the driving experience, that is why you buy this car. So you hope in a lot of ways that it's better than the regular STI. I've spent time on track, I've driven it on the street, and I've looked at all the performance aspects of it. And one of my favorite things is 3 things that I didn't talk about in the shop on purpose. The first thing is the steering. We have a hydraulic power steering rack, and this is one of the better feeling steering racks you can get on the market, and that's because it's old school. When you're driving hard, specifically, there's a ton of feedback. As soon as those front tires lose grip, it feels amazing. There's this kickback, there's this feedback, you know exactly what's happening when you're starting to push this car hard. And, you know, it kind of goes away over regular road, you know, over regular bumps and stuff. You don't feel it as much. But really, when you're driving this hard, this is where the steering rack is a huge deal to why you buy an STI. The second thing is the shifter. Gone are the days of rod-shifted mechanisms, which means the stick that you're rowing gears with, it has a rod that goes down into the transmission, so there is this more direct connected feel with the car. So when you shift, you kind of feel exactly what the gearbox is doing, and it's surprisingly fun to shift and drive. And the last part of that equation is the clutch, and the clutch has this heavier feel to it. And you know, it's these three things that connect you so much to the driving experience that so many modern cars don't. You don't have cable shifted mechanisms that it basically feels like a video game. That's how most cars are. Most clutches are super light. This doesn't have that. Between these three things, I love driving this car. Now the other elements to it, you still have a manual parking brake. You don't have a electronic parking brake here, so when you come to a stop, you can just rip up the handle. It's just this old school connected feel. And I'm gonna give this bonus points for something else. Visibility. My God, is it good. You know, despite the wing in the back, I mean, you don't want for really anything else. You can see around you and you can tell even from this camera angle that there's so much glass. You don't need to rely on blind spot monitoring or electronics to let you know where you're at or you're not at. And that's why this is such a special driving experience. So I'm gonna roll to a stop here, kind of take off and see how this thing, you know, gets off the line. You have all-wheel drive. Typically I drive with traction and stability control off, sport sharp, and the e-diff and manual pretty much all the way negative. And that just kind of gives you the most rear-wheel drive bias feel. One of the best parts about the STI is the tuning. The tuning is more designed for high RPM action. You really have to push this car to the max RPMs to feel the engine power, and that's where the tuning is at its best. If you decide that you're just gonna putt around town, that's kind of where I have my problem with it, is it just kind of feels stuttery, laggy. It doesn't like to hang out in the lower RPM range. As soon as you wind it out, it feels so good. And you know, that's where this differs from the regular WRX, which I kind of had a huge problem with when I drove it. It felt like such horse shit. It felt like the engineers didn't know what they were doing with the tuning. It was just kind of dialing back power, cutting timing, and there's a little bit of this here. I mean, there's weirdness when you're just kind of keeping it between 2,500 and 4,500. It just feels like it's not the smoothest acceleration, but when you're going flat out, that's when I enjoy this the most. Now the other thing is they've changed the suspension tuning. You have Bilstein dampers now. You have some revisions in aero, and on the street, I would say if all you're doing is putting around, just go with the regular WRX. I think everybody said that. Now in smooth pavement, this thing is no issue. When the pavement gets rough, it's probably going to be too much for most people. But obviously, if you're buying an RA, if you're buying this car, you already know what you're getting into. You can expect a firmer ride, more body control. Now, the most negative attribute to this car, aside from, if you consider this dated, the interior and all that, the biggest negative thing I could say about it is, on track and on the street, with these tires and this complete stock setup, I still feel like there's way too much understeer. I mean, it's more neutral than the regular STI. It doesn't understeer as much, but it understeers way too much for a car that's trying to be a track toy or something that's more hardcore. You understeer it through every tight corner. And I think a lot of it is you don't have enough camber up front. So I feel like this is yet another car that you're gonna have to spend even more money to go and modify, adjust the suspension, probably change the suspension, or at least put in camber plates to get rid of that terminal understeer, that annoying understeer when you're first getting out there. Now tires might band-aid it if you have stickier tires up front, but eventually if you're driving hard, it's going to really annoy you. Final thoughts on the WRX STI RA. What I'm about to say, certain people will completely connect with. Others will be dumbfounded. I had the Subaru, the Focus RS, and the Type R at Road America in a shorter configuration. I drove all three, and I looked at the times from all of them, and the Subaru was the slowest of the three. But the thing was, I enjoyed driving the Subaru more than the other two. In fact, if you pressed me right now and said, you know what, you gotta buy one of these three cars, which would you enjoy the most driving more hardcore? I'd say the Subaru every single time. And it makes almost no sense because in terms of performance, it's not the best performance car of the three. In terms of stock, buying it from the dealership, it's certainly not the fastest. It doesn't have the best grip. It doesn't have the best chassis, doesn't have the best interior or features, and it's certainly the worst value of all three. So why would I choose it over those other two? And this is the big intangible about sports cars. And I said this in a post on Instagram to Engineering Explained, where he's talking about the 10-speed automatic in the Lexus LC, which I think is a great car. But there's something about certain cars that aren't about the technology. They're not about all the features, about all the safety and all the glitz and the glam that the PR people spin. It's about the connectedness in your driving experience. And that's something that the RA does so much better than many cars. The way that the manual transmission feels, the way that the steering feels, the way that you feel something when you drive it, and the way that it connects with you dynamically. It's just a really good car. And a lot of it is because it is, again, old school. And that's why certain cars are more relevant. They could be 20 years old and they're still relevant today. And I think that says a lot about this Subaru and its community. People still love the STI. They love the WRX. It has a rabid following, and it's still going to be relevant in another 10 years when a lot of these high-tech cars or, cars that were built around PR or marketing buzz, everybody's going to forget about them, but people will still be driving this. And granted, I don't think this car's worth $50,000. I think if you can get, and they sit on the dealerships longer on the dealership floors, if you can get them close to a regular STI, this is gonna make you super happy if you're in the market for that. But if you don't track drive, you don't drive aggressively, unless you're a Subaru fanatic or a collector, I don't see where this is really gonna do anything for you. Well, I hope that helps. Take care. I'll see you next video.